Hello and good morning, and welcome to the Chronic Hope Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to healing the house of addiction. You might be joining us now as a person struggling with addiction or a family member who is trying to help their loved one work through addiction, but at the end of the day, things aren't going the way that you want. We have with us today Kevin Petersen, who wrote the book on healing the house of addiction. The Chronic Hope, Parenting the Addicted Child, and soon to be your second release, which to be determined on the title, another book coming out to help the family heal from addiction. And Kev, even today, before we get started, talk about why it's so important for you to help the whole family heal from addiction.
Absolutely. Good morning, Danny. It's good to see you, man. And it's critical to have the whole family involved in the process of recovery, because addiction affects and traumatizes the entire family. And so removing someone from the family system and putting them into treatment or getting them help or just telling them they can't be part of the family system only addresses the individual. It doesn't address the entire family system and the damage and the issues and the trauma that have been caused within the structure of the family. And so it's critical that the family seek their own help, their own therapy, their own recovery, and their own education, so that when it's time to reintegrate, they're recovered as well. The worst thing we can do is take somebody out of a system, get them into 30, 60, 90 days of treatment and get them back on track, and then bring them back into the same system that hasn't changed.
That makes a lot of sense. And today we're specifically going to be talking about what to do if your loved one relapses. So if you've been following the Chronic Hope podcast, we've been breaking down the top 10 questions that Kev gets asked by family members who are supporting their loved one through treatment. Kev isn't always the person getting the addict treatment, but he is the person that is helping the family heal from addiction. And Kev, you work with plenty of treatment centers around the U.S. who bring you in to help their families heal. And we've been talking about what you hear most from these people. And one of the questions you hear most from them is, what do we do if they relapse? Because relapse can happen. And you've got pretty clear direction on this. And let's dive into what you call Plan A.
Yeah, sure. Well, and the significant thing is that so now we're into like the third phase, right, of what we call family case management. So we've initially done the preparing stage and the before stage where the family has come to me and we've set up Plan A and we've said, okay, here's how we're going to approach the person that needs help. And then we've approached them and, potentially, let's say they've gone to treatment. Then we go into stage 2, which is, now the family takes care of themselves. Now we're into stage 3 and we're reintegrating. And if we're in stage 3 and there's a relapse, the answer is simple. You already have Plan A from the first stage, from the before stage. And so now let's talk about what Plan A is. It's boundaries, accountability, and structure. And so the boundaries, it's just your lines, your parameters set for what you will and will not tolerate. So if we're talking about somebody that just got out of treatment, that just started using again, the boundary is going to be no drugs, no alcohol. The accountability is, well, how do we take care of that? What do we do? Well, it's a measure of how do you activate the boundary? For drugs and alcohol, it's going to be simple. We're going to use a breathalyzer and we're going to drug test them on a regular basis to see where it's at. And it's critical when we do these in the drug testing that they get a drug test at a facility, not at home, because the facility will tell us the number, just not a positive, negative, but how much they're using. Maybe they had a beer or smoked a little bit of pot and it was a one-timer and they're like, whoops, my bad. We don't need to ship them back off to treatment. We just need to get them back on track and not have the whole, for lack of a better term, Chinese fire drill. That's probably not appropriate to say, but, the fire drill, let's just say the fire drill, where everybody goes crazy and doesn't know what to do and starts creating a lot of panic and crisis and drama. We just go back to Plan A, boundary, accountability, and structure. And if they can get it together and stop drinking and stop using the drugs, then we just go back to the relapse plan or the discharge plan that they came home with. Therapy, family therapy, AA, probably see a doctor, health, nutrition, all that sort of stuff. We don't let this completely shut down everything. We just cycle back in. By the way, if we're talking about somebody that you came home and you found them with a needle in their arm, we're going right back into treatment.
Right. And for families that might not understand this, what types of mistakes are they making when the loved one does relapse? What would you deem sort of not good moves that families are making if they're not equipped with this type of information?
Well, one of the classic ones is, well, it's okay. It's not that big a deal. They went to treatment because they had a problem with meth. So it's okay if they drink alcohol. That wasn't their issue. Or they went to treatment because their problem was opiates. So it's okay for them to smoke pot. And what they need to understand is that clean and sober means clean and sober across the board. Rarely do I know. I have plenty of friends that are meth addicts, recovering meth addicts, and all sorts of other addicts. And hold on, I'm sorry.
Problem, man. Yeah, and if you're just joining us live or in the replay, I do want to let you know that this podcast is dedicated to helping you work through the steps of having that loved one in your house struggling with addiction. And we are here to make sure that you have the clear, concise. Today we talked about Plan A. How many steps to this plan are there that are outlined in your book, Kevin?
There are 3: Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. So Plan A is we're going to set them up with the boundaries, accountability, and structure. And if they fail Plan A, then we're going to go to Plan B. And Plan B, you want to pop that one up there, is intervention and treatment. And so we're going to work with an interventionist, and we're going to pick out a treatment center, and we're going to have and a lot of times if somebody's already just come home from treatment, we're just going to cycle them right back into the same place we were before. And in the book, and in both books, actually, we outline how to pick an interventionist, how to pick a treatment center, what are the appropriate measures to take, what are the costs, what does it look like, how does it work? So we really try to demystify the whole process. My great fear is that people just pop up on Google and put, I need treatment for my son. And what they're going to get is a lot of sort of questionable information. And you're going to get the people that pay the most money for the SEO and then the advertising. And so then we're going to then we get the review of the continuum of care. So the question is, do we need to cycle them back into detox? Do they need to go back to inpatient? Do they need to go back to PHP, IOP, and sober living? Where are we on this process? And this is the plan. The whole important part here, Danny, is that this is the plan. And the family just needs to follow the plan. And again, it's critical that the family take care of themselves and take care of their own needs and take care of their own issues so that when something like this happens, it doesn't completely throw them into chaos.
Because one of the main reasons, and I think this is important to touch on, Kev, is that you wrote this book. You do this on the daily for people because you hate to see the whole family affect addiction to the point that the family breaks up. We know this is a stressful part of life when we have an addict in the family or someone struggling with addiction. And we know that it's stressful on the whole family. And we know most families go into this with zero to little plan at all. They're going to take advice from friends and family. What I love about what you do, Kev, is this is a very concise, easy to follow plan that over the course of how many years have you been doing this?
Well, I've been 30 years in my own recovery.
30 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that gives you the knowledge of knowing, when you do this on the professional basis, this gives you the knowledge of seeing what happens and then what the outcome from that action is. And from what you've seen, these 3 steps have given your families the most success to move forward, even in situations where their loved one does relapse.
Absolutely. I mean, I literally just had this question on Friday afternoon. I had a therapist that I work with say, hey, I got one of the families asking, what do we do if they relapse? And I said, well, first of all, did you tell them to read the book? And they were like, and here's the answer. She was like, I told them to read the book. They haven't read the book. They're still in the perspective of, we just need you to fix him and everything will be okay. And gotcha. They're not really taking a look at the family system and how the family system can integrate and solve the problem. But then I said,
yeah. So what would you say? I love that we talked about plan B is going back into treatment and getting back into that continuum of care. But what if a loved one's watching right now? They've put their son or daughter or family member through treatment 3 times. And what if their question is, do I have to keep paying for treatment?
Great question. That's okay. Right. So now we're cycling back into, okay, they definitely need to go back to treatment. What do we do? So I get, and I also get this a lot of times too. It's like, we're tapped out. This has cost us a lot of money. And ideally, the first question is always, do they have insurance? And what kind of insurance do they have? Because I'm willing to bet we can find a facility somewhere in the country that'll take their insurance. If they don't have insurance, is it a cash pay? Okay, great. So let's talk about what can you afford. And what I always tell the family is, if you can afford it and they're willing to participate and they're like, hey, I need help, I'm going back in, then let's try to figure out a way to work within your budget. If their position is, I ain't going and I ain't doing it and I don't need, no way, then the family, I would tell them to go back to plan C, which is, hey, you're an adult. You can make your own choices. If you decide to use drugs and drink, that's fine. We're just not going to participate. As soon as you decide you want to get healthy and recover, we'll be happy to help you. But until then, we're going to keep you at arm's length. So the answer to the question is, the answer to the question is yes, you can. If you want to pay for it, you can. You don't have to. And there are plenty of options. There are plenty of options everywhere in the country that are free. They may not be sexy and glamorous, but they're available.
Got it. And then for even the family member that is wondering, I love how you say to people, you have to be okay whether they're sober or not. Talk about the importance of the person that the family member has, because at the end of the day, again, another reason we do this is because we see the people that are lost from addiction. We see the people that go down the road and they don't make it. And talk about how you feel that family members need to be okay whether their loved one is sober or not. And I think that cycles back to your idea of the family being in recovery as well.
Right. And so what I call that is you got to get yourself to a place of neutrality. So whether or not your loved one uses or sober, whatever, or participates or doesn't participate, or their behavior doesn't change, maybe they're not drinking and they're not using, but they're still not behaving very well, you can still get to a place of neutrality. And what that means is, I'm going to respect your choice. If you're going to choose to drink or do drugs, or you're going to choose to have behavior that I find unacceptable, again, I'm going to keep some distance from you. And I'm happy to spend time with you. I'm happy to hang out with you. But I want to let you know that these behaviors are not acceptable to me. And the critical thing I always tell families, there's two parts to that. One is you got to do your own work. You literally got to look into your own therapy. You got to look into your own abandonment and attachment wounds. You got to look into your own trauma wounds, possibly your own 12-step work. And from that, you're going to find, how do I get through the day? One of the things the families always say to me is, how do I get away from the fact that every time the phone rings, I start to freak out a little bit? I get that feeling in my stomach, like, oh God, here we go again. And I say, well, just like the addict has to learn how to live without drugs and alcohol and get neutral around that, so do you. You got to get neutral around if anytime there's a crisis, it's suddenly your responsibility to jump in and fix it. That's the hard part for the family. The family really has to learn how to stand back and be a spectator in that person's life, offer help, and if help is taken, then okay, fine, great, we'll help you. But if the help is not taken, then you got to stand back and be like, hey, you know what? You let me know when you're done, because I'm right here and I love you.
Yeah. And if you're interested in learning more, or you're interested in learning plan A, plan B, and plan C, and how to put those into practice in your life, and you're tired of being on that sort of revolving wheel of things and feeling out of control, then we want to encourage you to possibly consider buying the book, Chronic Hope, Parenting the Addicted Child. That's the first installment that Kevin wrote that clearly outlines these 3 steps of getting to the point where you can be where he says you're okay. And also, you're writing your second book, Kev. Why don't you give a really 10,000-foot view of what you expect to give listeners and readers in the second piece of content you're releasing?
Absolutely. The second book, sort of the working title, is Chronic Hope, Families in Addiction. And the concept there is kind of what I referred to before, where it's before, during, and after. So the first phone call I always get is, oh my God, my son, my husband, my dad, my brother, my sister, my mother, they have a problem and they're going to kill themselves. What do we do? So they're looking for that immediate triage plan. And then, so, how do we put together the plan? How do we hold our boundaries? That's plan A. How do we go to plan B and find an interventionist and find a treatment center that's not going to try to take, our life savings and will actually help my person. And that's before. And then during, the second part is now that person's in treatment or you've set the boundaries with them and they've chosen to disengage, you're going to learn how to take care of yourself. That's part 2. And then part 3 is how do we bring the family back together and reintegrate? And the thing is, Danny, this whole thing is based upon my personal and professional experience. So when I was 27, my parents did plan A. They were like, yeah, we're not doing this. And then they went straight to plan B. And I didn't get an intervention, but I got an intervention from a therapist I was seeing with my dad in 1991. And then, I went to AA and started recapturing my life and got my act back together. And then we reintegrated. And honestly, the reintegration really didn't go that well. So this is kind of a personal labor of love for me, is the idea of this is what I would have liked to have seen how things go and how to help families get there.
Yeah, so that's important to know. This isn't just something that you studied, which is important. This is something you lived. This is something you've gone through. This has a personal connection to you, and you're interested in making sure that families move through these steps in an order that makes sense, that protects them, that protects their loved one. And again, that also doesn't make sure that they go down the wrong road. So if you yourself have listened to today's content, you're very intrigued, you found that today's content was helpful. Well, this is episode number 11, by the way. We have 10 other episodes that we have sort of crafted to help answer the most popular questions that family members have during, before, and after treatment. And we want to encourage you to go over to the Chronic Hope Institute on YouTube and subscribe and watch more content there at your own discretion, at your own pace. You can start to learn, because the one thing that we do know is that the hardest part of getting this process started at the end of the day is picking up this device, reaching out and saying, I need help. I'm not equipped. I need help. Can you help me get there? And, if you want to get involved in family case management, Kevin works with human beings across the entire country, and works with treatment centers across the entire country as well. So if you'd like a head start on getting this process done, then we would encourage you to reach out and get the process started. So Kev, for anybody that's kind of on the fence, they've been listening, they've been watching, they wonder if you have the ability to help them, what would you say to that person?
What I would say is don't be shy. Pick up the phone, send me an email, send me a text. We've got a couple of different people within the structure of the company. We have a couple people in Florida, a couple people in Colorado. We work with people all over the country. This is what we do. This is our normal. This is our jam. We like that first phone call of, oh my God, I've got an addict in the house. What do I do? We have a plan and we're here to help, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
I love that. And if you're thinking, this feels like the most stressful thing in your life, well, this is what Kev does on the daily. So he's going to listen, he's going to find the details, and he's going to point you in the right direction without all of that emotional attachment and what you're going through with your loved one, which oftentimes is what people need. So Kev, thanks today for really breaking down what to do if your loved one relapses. I thought today was very helpful on pointing families in the right direction. To recap, you talk about going back to plan A, right?
Yeah, right back to plan A. That's why we established it. The whole point is that when the family shows up, they are just completely lost and frazzled. And so I want to triage it and say, okay, here's the plan. Let's just follow the plan. And that makes everybody take a deep breath like, okay, there's a plan. Let's follow the plan.
Awesome. Well, thanks today again for your time, Kev. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast, we encourage you to click the share button so that someone else that needs to see this can hear this information to help them get on the path of being at that point where they're comfortable with what's going on with their loved one who's struggling with addiction. So, Kev, thanks again for today, and we'll see you on our next podcast, episode number 12.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. I'm looking forward to it. And who knows, we may have a book to talk about by then.
I love that.
All right,
awesome, man. Enjoy your day.
Okay, you too. Thanks for your time.